Should you ice bath for athletic performance? This has been a huge topic of interest in the research in the past 10 to 15 years. We actually did a podcast about this a few weeks ago, so if you haven't checked that out, definitely do. And as always, follow, share, and save this video for later. Now, before we get into whether we should ice bath or not, it would be beneficial to understand what happens physiologically within our muscles when we exercise and what happens when we ice bath. So when we exercise, we cause muscle damage or cause muscle stress. And this stress can be generally broken up into two different types: mechanical stress and metabolic stress. There's lots of different types of metabolic stress. Reactive oxygen species that get developed and created within our muscles can cause actual cell structure damage, decreasing force capabilities and decreasing athletic performance. They also increase inflammation signaling pathways within our body, increasing inflammation, increasing blood flow, and too much inflammation can cause secondary tissue and secondary cell damage as well. There's also metabolites that increase and cell swelling. Another word for cell swelling is edema, and this edema can cause mechanical stress, compress capillaries, impair O2 delivery, and cause soreness. Mechanical stress, on the other hand, is a little bit simpler. Generally speaking, high forces can cause direct damage to cell and muscular structures. So what happens physiologically when we take an ice bath? It can decrease muscular temperature, which decreases muscle metabolism, decreasing reactive oxygen species and the damage that's done by that. It can also increase vasoconstriction, which decreases blood flow, decreasing edema and inflammation and the damage that's caused by that. It can also decrease neuroconductive velocity, which helps with spasm, pain, and taking us from a more sympathetic state, which is our fight and flight response, to a parasympathetic state, which is our rest and digest side of our nervous system. Also, and this pertains specifically when you're training in the heat, ice baths can help redirect blood from the skin back into our working muscles to improve recovery at those working muscles. Also, it helps redirect blood back to our central vasculature, decreasing the cardiovascular stress, especially if we're doing endurance type exercise. So how does this all play into actually answering the question, should we ice bath? And when I actually looked into the research, this was way more complicated than even I anticipated. But I'm going to try to break this down into two different sides. Ice baths for repeat performance, so if you're in a CrossFit competition or a football tournament where you have repeat performance or repeat events or games in the same day or over the course of 3 or 4 days, or taking ice baths long term for adaption and improve recovery from a training session where you're looking for a training adaption. The literature for ice bath for repeat performance is all over the place, with different research showing different things. Decreased muscle temperature and a decreased nerve conduction velocity and putting ourselves in more of a parasympathetic state might be the reason why one study showed that ice baths can actually impair sprint performance. On the other hand, decreased neural conduction velocity, which decreases pain, as well as redirection of blood from the periphery into our central vasculature, as well as into the working muscles, may be the reason why another study showed that actually cold water immersion helped the second bout of 35 minutes of intense cycling, compared to a group that just had 60 minutes active recovery. But what about training adaption? And to understand this, we have to think back to what happens when we exercise. We talked about lots of inflammation, lots of edema, and blood flow that happens when we exercise and cause muscular damage. And although on the surface this looks bad, and a big part of the reason for that inflammation is to bring the substrates and the materials that our body needs to actually adapt and build better cell structures and muscular structures for the next time we train or further down the line. So actually getting completely rid of that inflammation may not be a beneficial thing if we're looking for training adaption and we're not too concerned about performance the next day or the day after. One study that I found looked at the impact of cold water immersion on the rate of protein synthesis. They found that the cold water immersion group actually had a significant decrease in protein synthesis rate and anabolic signaling pathways than the group that wasn't subject to cold water immersion. So where does that leave us? Well, here's what I think. If you're looking for repeat performance, I think cold water immersion for 15 minutes in water that's 15 or so degrees Celsius can really help. It can be very beneficial to decrease the blood flow, decrease pain, especially in soreness, even if it's a placebo effect, and make you feel fresh for the next day. However, you need to be aware and careful that you're not going directly from the ice bath and then wanting to have improved performance, because that can actually impair performance, especially especially if you're looking for a short burst of energy like a sprint. So making sure that you have sufficient time between the ice bath and your performance, as well as a sufficient warm up to make sure that the temperature of the core body as well as your muscle has been able to get back up to the temperature that it needs to work at 100%. Now, on the side of long-term training, I'm not so sure that ice baths would be the thing that I would go to immediately. Sure, it could help with training, but you might actually blunt the effect of the training that you're doing by decreasing that inflammation and decreasing the ability for your body to recover. That being said, if you really find that, having an ice bath once a week after training helps you feel fresher and helps you train harder for the week coming up, I don't think there's enough evidence to really rule that out. However, on the other side, I would say if you're finding yourself having to have an ice bath to keep up with the volume of training that you're doing, if that is a long-term problem, then maybe you have to look at the volume of training that you're doing and maybe taking that back a bit and allowing your body to recover naturally. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have gotten anything from it, let us know in the comments below. Make sure you share it and save it and follow along.